to The Breakup Theory, conversations on ending things and collective liberation. In today's episode, Caroline and I respond to a couple listeners' letters. As I was editing the episode, I thought about the common theme and came to this idea of getting over things. The first letter asks about how much work we are supposed to put into our relationships and ourselves, and what are the ethics of leaving someone in a crisis. The second letter asks for support around a relationship from years ago that is still able to wound, especially based on the ex's perceived success. Now, I don't need to force a common thread on these two letters brought together by happenstance, but I wanted to add some thoughts at the beginning, and this is what resonated with things I've been thinking about. We expect to be able to get over, to survive the wounds or trauma that afflicts us. I think about how Freud in Beyond the Pleasure Principle describes the formation of consciousness like a crust or scab that forms from repeated trauma. If we're born from that pain, how does it come to define us? Or can we operate in it differently? Instead, we aim for something like wholeness or health, a fascist sense of hygiene implicated in white supremacy. As someone with a chronic illness, I've been plagued by these standards, even coming from other sick people, like, if you just do the right things, you can put yourself back together. But I found myself, in responding to these letters, coming to this thought about getting over doing the wrong thing, or getting over things that go badly. How do we survive wrongness? Sometimes someone gets hurt, sometimes people make choices you don't agree with. I hate to come to this idea that the experience of pain and loss ends up teaching us valuable lessons, because I don't want to impose a redemptive narrative. But I also hope to be something more than someone bitterly nursing my wounds. This situation has parallels in moments of political conflict, the infighting that results after an action that has already taken place, about whether it should have or should not have happened that way, who did a bad or dangerous thing. My thought usually is, this is what happened. Let's go from there and support each other. I'm thinking also about the way people who watched the Al-Aqsa flood make a violent tear into the structure of Zionist settler colonialism, and though they were not there, felt the need to condemn certain actions or approve of them, as if the social media play-by-play was a film for us to consume. In the struggle for freedom, you can't stop to ask permission, especially not from the colonizers. Our affirmations or negations aren't needed, despite the internet hot take machine. We can get so hung up trying to decide what is revolutionary and what is liberatory when things are underway, and just kind of miss the whole force of resistance and liberation that's going on, especially when we're so far from where the most poignant action is taking place. We can stay stuck so much in thinking about how it should be done and what could possibly happen and what are the perfect ways, and forget that the world is way more complex than that and nothing happens perfectly. In the vapid political realm, we can also see the negative effects of grievance politics. It is clearly a major tool of the reactionary right, and the common fascist mode of claiming victim status to usher in violent repression. This is arguably the psychic dimension behind Israel's defense of its genocide, made so effective because European Jews were once the actual victims of fascism. However, that victim status is made perpetual even while the state formed in its wake wields asymmetrical power over the people they claim threaten their existence. The US right wing does this too, fingering migrants, trans kids, women, crime, anything to get people feeling unsafe and desperate for a lifeline. And then in the wake of Biden stepping down, I think also about how liberals and Democrats mime outrage over every terrible thing the right wing and Republicans say or do, but never follow through with any of their half-assed criticisms to a conclusion that helps anyone. The outrage tries to claim for itself reason, facts, even moral superiority, and yet it can't move from there to any significant action, dooming us to the slow attrition of life. I see this attitude in myself, how the so-called injustice can freeze you in solipsistic act of pointing at the thing that was done wrong, bemoaning the wrongness of the world, staying stuck. In the past year, I felt wounded by some targeting in a community space, and I'm still discovering how the effects continue to deter my action or influence my choices. Being shockingly hurt continues to rumble beneath everything. But what if our sticking to our hurt and wishing for healing is actually a way to distract ourselves from our own power? As a sick person, I stay so worried about symptoms and flares that I miss the moments my body is doing what I need and want it to do. Illness determines my life. We watch the slow motion approach of fascism shaking our fists and wondering about everyone else's lack of awareness. It turns out everyone else is doing the same thing. Lately, I've been trying to work out some thoughts about where our power actually lies in the long struggle for liberation and how we can stop being afraid to wield power. And I'm thinking about how the thing that draws our attention is often the places where we are doomed from the outset, while we overlook the places of strength, of freedom, of connection. We can tell a story that makes the way things are inevitable and unchangeable, deadlocked with a foe, or we can make up a new story of escape. Let the energy of not getting over it become a powerful motor to determine our own fates. That's where I am today. I hope you like the conversation. As always, please rate and follow us on your podcasting things. Share our show with your friends and exes. Subscribe to the Patreon. Nothing's paywalled, and you'll get notified of all the different things I'm putting out there. You can also add some financial support if you wish. Finally, if you want to submit your own questions or breakup story, write us at forum.jotforum.com/thebreakuptheory/stories or call 917-426-6548. And now for the conversation.
This is Julie and Caroline, more Agony letters.
Another entry.
2 entries. I'll go ahead and start with the first one. So I'm going to read exactly what they sent. This is what they wrote. Some people say you find the one, you make it work. Some people say you have to love yourself at first. I was caught between a long-term home-sharing partner, their anxiety, and PMDD, which is premenstrual dysphoric disorder, and a new partner who was more like a mirror of mine. In parentheses, all hearts were broken in the filming of this. End parentheses. How on earth do you maintain resolve in the face of someone else's mental health crisis? How do you let someone down easy?
Yeah, it's a short letter, but there's so much there. I mean, they're asking a specific question, but there's a lot of sort of dynamics at play. Like first, they're like quoting this wisdom, right? Like you find the person and you make it work no matter what. Or like you can't make it work with a person until you've done the work for yourself, love yourself at first. That's their preface, which I think is worth addressing, just those ideas. And then they specifically talk about their experience. And then they have this other question of like, how do you support a partner in a mental health crisis, which is like another whole can of worms. Where do you want to start?
I don't actually know. I think we can just start from the top. So we've talked about this a little bit before. Some people say you find the one, you make it work. Some people say you have to love yourself at first. I guess the reason I think it's quoting something is because there's some slant rhyme.
Yeah.
But I am really struck by work and love being conflated and not in a way that's entirely critical. I guess I've just been trying in my own relationships and life and heart to consider work as a collaborative process that is not necessarily for productivity's sake or for capitalist means, right? So I think we could talk all day long about the critique of saying you have to work at relationships or like relationships are work. But for me, they kind of are. And I'm not too quick or eager to completely discount that. You have a lot more background in all of the different definitions of work than I do. So I'd be really curious to hear what you have to say about that. But work and labor are, I would guess that this person has done a lot of work and has labored quite a lot in their relationships, particularly the two relationships they're speaking to, right? Which is it sounds like the nesting partner was somebody that was struggling with some mental health crises, and then another partner who felt more like a mirror to the writer. And I would be pretty shocked if none of those relationships required any sort of emotional laboring. So I just want to kind of throw that out there as a place to start, whether or not it is falling into a trap to say that relationships are work, or our relationships just fucking work sometimes.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to start, just like the terminology of work. I mean, as you were talking, I was thinking about Wages Against Housework, this text from the 70s by Silvia Federici. It's a feminist text, and it's talking about what Marxist feminists call social reproduction, which is like all the quote unquote non-productive labor, right? The unwaged work that goes into actually making capitalism possible. And this is like work that is historically stolen from women, right? It's like the making sure that the people are fed and bred. But she goes on to say that like in the naturalization process of creating a woman's role to do this housework and to serve the man through these hierarchies, we're like taught that it's love, right? That love means serving other people, and that love means working for them, basically, right? Or working within this system, because not everyone, I mean, right, it doesn't necessarily even need to be like a very clearly or explicitly exploitative in a relationship, and you're still like somehow in your relationship reproducing. So she says like if we could actually refuse to do this work, then we could start to begin to understand what love even is, because we have been taught that love includes, especially for feminized people, service,
Yeah. Yeah.
work, endless work, right? And then I think like then we could kind of frame historically, right, like kind of post 70s feminism, that there's like a kind of twisting of this logic towards like these lines to me sound like self-helpy in a way, right? Like this person is who wrote to us is kind of quoting like kind of general wisdom that people say about relationships, and so like if we say relationships require a lot of work, it's again to me talking about a process of making something that might not be good work for you, right? Like I mean, I grew up in that idea of this household where like there was a lot of discord, but the idea was that relationships involve work and you need to work at it, and like sort of you like owe it to each other to do the work, which doesn't necessarily look straight in the face that what could be a fundamental problem, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't allow you off the hook. If
Right.
you say a relationship always needs work, then you could always do more and put more into it. It's like an endless thing. So like, and then on the other side, we have like, you have to love yourself, which is like this individualist idea, right? That like, I think can end up with a philosophy where relationships are basically there to serve you, right? Like you're the main character and everyone else is like there for you to kind of discover yourself through. But I don't necessarily, this isn't, I don't think what the person's saying. And I think that we can like relate to these ideas in a way that's not necessarily like bad. Like, I think it is basically true that like you need to be able to be with yourself, because in the end you have to deal with yourself, like no one else is going to do it for you. And I do think that like care is a kind of work, and when we acknowledge it as a kind of work, then maybe we can renegotiate the ways it's done so that it isn't stolen from us. But like as we live in this world dominated by capitalism, which is facilitated through race and gender and sexuality and all this stuff, like we are produced by these systems and we help reproduce them, and so it's not like possible to just like immediately escape from them. And everyone's all fucked up from this, trying their best often. So like I think that like there's no like bit of wisdom that tells you exactly how everything should go.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like what you said and where you started us off, because it really encapsulates the tension, which is that all of these multiple things are happening at once and simultaneously. And we also have experiences because of the limitations of being of individual bodies and individual brains and individual experiences, right? Like I'm contained, like I'm moving throughout the world. I've got a heartbeat and it's not your heartbeat. And therefore, how I am is kind of constrained and predicated on that. So there is a limitation to how much I can give and how much I can take in. And even though the person writing in was not asking us like to break those two things down, they really do capture what I think can often make us feel like being a person who's in relationship to other people is just like fucking impossible, because there's so much pressure to do it well or do it gracefully. And we don't always do it gracefully or even all that well.
Yeah,
But
most of us are operating at a deficit. So
well, that's what I was just thinking, right? Is like it sounds like that was the other thing I was going to go into, is my sense from what has been written in is this person got to a place of just total stretch, right? Like overstretch, over capacity. And they're asking, how do you resolve a crisis and how do you let someone down easy? And it's okay. The writer doesn't need to like go into more detail. They don't owe us that. But my sense is, I don't know if you got this sense, but my sense is that at least one of these relationship structures has collapsed under this stress, right?
yeah, I think you could simplify this. I mean, maybe what the question is like basically is like this person was in a relationship with someone who is having a really hard time and maybe has been having a hard time, or like, with PMDD, it's going to be something that's like regular, like, it happens monthly, right? Probably to varying degrees of severity. And then you meet someone who's like not burdened with that as far as
Right.
there's gays love twinning, right? Like
Yeah.
this is a mirror. And so if there's like an ethical question of like, can I leave a person who's suffering for something new? Or even just like, you don't even have to have someone to pull you out of it. Can I leave someone suffering because it's like hurting me?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Right.
And
Well,
I,
which brings us back to where you started, which is if we don't consider love as just like a means of reproducing power structures, then what is it?
yeah, right. So, I mean, it's like this delicate balance, right, between autonomy, right? Because like I would just like fundamentally say, no, you don't have to stay in anything out of some obligation that you don't want to take up and that could be harming you. You don't have to, but you
Yeah.
can choose to do that, right? And I think it's important to like acknowledge it as a choice. If I'm with someone who is going through some mental health issue or crisis or whatever, I choose if I want to show up or not, right? And you can choose that. It can change over time. And I think when you do that, you have to sort of be willing to frame relationship issues through this crisis that's happening in order to kind of try to protect yourself from some of it, if that makes sense. And because like I think we can also enter into each other's craziness when, I don't know, I think about this from my own mental health struggles. Like sometimes you try to pull someone in with you,
You're like, let's have a folly adieu. Why not?
right.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, I think if you are with someone who's having kind of struggle, like to be a caring and good partner involves you maintaining some kind of ground that can help anchor someone, but you can't do everything for someone too, right? Like some of that is going to be them having to get through and figure out ways. And yeah, it is a form of labor and you can choose whether to give it or not. And you may hurt someone if you leave
Probably
them.
will.
Yeah.
I
But
would I'd say it's almost guaranteed that you will hurt people.
yeah, right. You will hurt this person, but you do not owe it to them to make yourself suffer alongside them if that's work that you're unwilling to do.
Yeah, this is a way that I consider this, and maybe some of it is oversimplifying because I'm somebody who's prone to overthinking and can be really cerebral and in my head. So it's really helpful for me to just get really clear and as monosyllabic as possible, but not in this moment clearly. But I'm thinking about how if I'm doing something that is actually harmful for me, chances are it's not guaranteed, but chances are it's harmful for them too.
Right.
If I'm just continuing over and over and over again to say yes when really I mean no, or to say no when really I mean yes, then I am not really presenting an accurate, loving, honest picture of how I am to that person.
Right.
And this is something that I've done time and time again in crisis. As you were talking, Shuli, I was thinking about what you said about growing up in the home that you did and seeing firsthand, okay, what are the limitations to how much we can stretch and like labor for other people? And are people just continuing to overwork and overfunction in order to kind of hold up some sort of institution? And that wasn't my experience in my home growing up. I mostly just saw two people being in crisis all the time, just like fucking over and over and over and over. Like it just felt like there was no end.
Mm-hmm.
And so I learned to see love through the filter of crisis.
Yeah.
Like you love people when they're in crisis. Love ultimately means emergency. And that can be really hard because for the obvious reasons, right? It's exhausting. But I think it can really put people in dynamics where we're not even sure like what we're feeling or needing. And there's a imperative to that that makes sense in a crisis, right? Like if the fucking house is burning down, I shouldn't be sitting there thinking about what I need to do, right? Like I need to be tending to the crisis. I need to be getting out or saving my pets or my loved ones. But I think it's possible that this person is just like crispy as fuck from crisis after crisis after crisis after crisis. And if they have had any experiences that are similar to mine, it takes me a long time to regather a connection to myself and all of my parts and who I am in relationship to other people after that crisis. So it's never surprising to me when people either break up or change their relationship structure in the face of repeated crisis.
Yeah. I mean, I also just like, within sort of like queer world,
Mhm.
There's a tendency for us all to kind of identify as like having trauma, you know? And so I think it's a common dynamic in these kinds of
Yeah,
relationships
100%.
to be like in this kind of whirligig of triggering each other. Like one person gets triggered and then triggers the other person, and it's like it's just such a common relationship dynamic. And so like, it's also not surprising to me that in this situation, maybe someone else coming in, this new person allows the other person to be like, oh, there's like an outside to this, and sometimes you have to be reminded that you need to have like a kind of reality check. If you get mired in each other's shit and you can't get out, like having something external can help you be like, I need to, take a break from this or like leave it. And I think like that, that's why I like taking this angle of breaking up, because it's like to try to kind of put that possibility of relief from a situation that is maybe harming you. And it can also allow you to think about relationships like in a different way, which is like, I don't think that, again, like going back to the first lines of this, like there's rules or like wisdom or lessons that are universal. I wouldn't say like I'm anti like the kind of categorical imperative where it's like whatever I do has to be made a law for everyone, right? Every relationship you'll come out of being like learning a little bit more about how you care and want to be cared for, and then if you get into another relationship, then you can articulate that maybe a little bit better, but
Yeah.
you'll have a whole other set of like potential snags too. So it seems like you can take this situation, be like, this is what happened. It doesn't mean that it's like right forever, wrong forever.
I'm really glad you said that. That's where I was going with this. And I just looked at the definition of resolve because I was struck by that word, because in the letter this person says, how on earth do you maintain resolve in the face of someone else's mental health crisis? How do you let someone down easy? I don't know if they're talking about the same person. I assume that they probably are, but I could be wrong. But the definition of resolve includes settling or finding solutions, decide firmly on a course of action, firm determination to do something, right? Resolving something, whether the person is kind of consciously trying to use this word because it has such a rigid definition or not, maybe is beside the fact, but it speaks to what you're saying, which is that we don't know everything. We just don't know, more will be revealed, I hope, for this person. And when we're in crisis, or when we're a active holder of somebody else's crisis or an active mitigator of somebody else's crisis, if we're feeling that crisis in our limited body, mind, personhood, we're going to make decisions that are in response to a crisis. And that's not always going to look or feel like making a firm determination that feels good for everybody.
I would add just one more thing that came up for me is like, if we think about, from a kind of disability perspective, which, disability, chronic illness, and also like madness, right? Like, and this is against the kind of expected work ethic that we were talking about in the beginning. Like we try to map out our needs of care and think about interdependence. And right, if you are isolated in a dyad of crisis,
Exactly.
that isn't healthy for anyone. And you were sort of referring to that, but like we can't like be one person's individual like sole life preserver, and the actual like way that care tends to work best is when we have many people caring for each other, whether this is even like parenting to or just friendships. A lot of people caring for each other makes it a lot easier. Yeah, so I just was trying to bring that perspective in too.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. That was the other thing on my mind, which part of me is just investigative and an information gatherer. So I wanted to know more about who else is here and who can be supporting and coming in and holding things up in a way that maybe our writer just wasn't able to at that time. So
yeah,
one's hard, and I'm really hoping that everyone gets whatever they need from this, and that might not be known right now.
Yeah, and you could fuck up and then move on from that too. It's not
right. That's I love thinking about that.
Now, time for a little break. Back to the conversation.
Do you want to read the next one?
Yeah, let's go to the second one. Okay. My ex is in a very popular band, and it makes me feel horrible. I'm jealous of her, but also feel like I'm witnessing people adore someone who hurt me. I can't help but feel alone and like she's happy and living a better life than me. I hear about her whereabouts online and see people wear her band t-shirt. I feel like I can't get away. It's been 5 years since we broke up too. How do you manage this? This is another bunch of issues, right? Because there's like a relationship where harm has been done. There's also like the kind of ways that we judge ourselves against other people, whether that's like partners or friends or whatever. And then there's like also just like the kind of, I don't know, subcultural world
Yeah.
and the dynamics there, like of yeah, how we all engage in that. So it's like, I don't know, it's layered. I think one thing I would start with is how much work we do of projection to like imagine what other people's lives are like, and especially when we get stuck in like kind of envy, because that's one vector here, is that like the success of the ex's band is making the person who wrote feel jealous, right? But like, you know, just like to acknowledge that a lot of what we do is projection. We have no idea what the experience of that is, right? And this is also something that just happens within our relationships when we're actually like dealing with each other one on one. I think like so much of like romantic relationship is projection and then like mishearing each other. So I like there's that, right? Like this person looks like they're having the time of their life, but you have no idea, especially like when stuff's mediated through like Instagram or whatever. People, you know,
Totally.
make themselves look better.
No clue. We have no idea. Something I just thought about is, actually, I'm going to bring this up later, but it was a quote that I heard recently about celebrity, which I really love. So I'll come back to it. But yeah, jealousy is hard and envy is hard. I'm so fixated on words, but the difference between, you know, jealousy and envy feels critical here, right? Like jealousy is like, I'm afraid something's going to be taken from me. And envy is like, that person has this thing that I want.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And I'm not saying that in response to you, Shuli, but I'm saying it as something worth parsing apart here too, right? This person probably like wants to be seen and heard and believed that this ex was really shitty to them.
Yeah.
And I imagine that feeling of being seen and heard and believed feels kind of taken from them on a regular basis by how often they're seeing people engage, you know, like lovingly with their ex's band.
Yeah, if the harm had been acknowledged, then possibly the envy would be like lessened, right? Or I mean, I don't know if there's also the desire that like acknowledging the harm would mean that the band wouldn't gain that sort of popularity. This is like a huge problem in the music world.
Oh yeah.
There's like musicians harming other people, and then how that gets supported by having like a fan base, you know, which is also often a reservoir of people to harm because of the way that like celebrity or whatever works, even within small scenes. Yeah. So, right. I think you're really good to point out that there's like also this lack of being seen and heard and understood or believed or whatever in this form of harm. And like it seems like it's a situation where there's not maybe even a possibility of resolution or accountability, right? It's 5 years gone and this is where it's at.
I feel this person's pain. I can be pretty shitty internally about like, and I'm not saying this person's being shitty. I'm really using that word because I think it's a great way of owning the brattiness or frustration or feeling left out or wishing it had been me kind of feeling that I often have, just in terms of people getting things I want, you know, getting the attention I want, getting the praise I want, getting the recognition I want. And it would just, oh God, it would just like feel extra complicated if I was in this person's position. And so I'm just really empathizing with how tricky that is.
I've like fucking moved to get away from exes, right? Like being like, I can't live in this town anymore. But like then that imagines that you're able to like move away and not be continually reminded, but the popularity of the band means that person is always possibly present. And then I know we have, because of social media too, like this ability to indulge in kind of obsessive tendencies to like check up on exes all the time, you know, which like moving away doesn't even matter because you could just like like stalk your ex online or whatever. So that's like really hard because it kind of means that maybe like you can't actually finish something in some way, especially when there's like harm that's not been addressed.
Yeah, it's something that I talk with a lot of people about regularly in different circles is the tyranny of just having the ability to check up on whoever, whenever at our fingertips. This wasn't mentioned in the letter, but I just want to say if this person is struggling with continuously, obsessively looking their ex up, just to have some patience with your, I mean, patience 5 years later might be hard because by that time you might just be in a pattern that's really fixed, or at least can feel fixed from this moment. But just having some compassion and gentleness with the fact that if you're using a smartphone to continuously check in on your ex, like the smartphone was created for you to do that. That's why it exists. People who have more money than God have created that device and have created it with lots and lots of behavioral science to back it up. And we're just going to kind of look at the same thing over and over and over again. So if this person is in kind of an obsessive rut, I'm hoping that they're talking to people about it. You know, I'm hoping they have friends around them who can say, yeah, like there's that band t-shirt again. We're moving on. It's not fair for me to say that they need people to tell them to move on when the fact is I don't know to what degree there was harm and to what degree any sort of accountability process or healing was like taken from this person. But
Yeah, no, I think I understand you saying move on, not in terms of move on about the feelings, but like in the sort of obsessive relationship of like let's move on from the thing that's instigating that like cycle. And that's sort of where I wanted to go, is like to try to be aware of how you are using this to like hurt yourself, right? With like OCD stuff, you got to like think about, kind of take yourself out of the actual thing, because the thing itself isn't what's really happening, and then be like, what is this doing, right? And so I think like there might be something to interrogate about how this person's, you know, whatever success paired with the fact that they hurt you and there's no accountability for that is a thing that exists now that you can like relate to when you want to feel bad or hurt, right? Like to maybe externalize or to like to affirm a bad feeling that you're having internally. And so like the way to deal with something like this, I think, is to like kind of let that feeling go when you're feeling it, rather than acting it out or continuing to like lean into it, which I think also connects to this like really shitty aspect of this, which is that this person hurt you 5 years ago and there's no resolution to it, right? But like at some point, this person isn't going to give you what you need, right? And it looks like the community as a whole also isn't going to, and that fucking sucks. And you know, you can lean into that and like be like, I need to make it known and I'm gonna do this no matter what. Or you can like I don't know, like at some point it'll be, I think, better for you to not try to put energy into this thing that you're not, that looks like you're not going to get. I mean, as much as you can like this, it feels like letting a person off the hook who did something shitty, but I think it's like for your own good to not like kind of contort yourself around a harm.
Yeah.
Also, this person's probably shitty, continuing to hurt people, and now has a platform that allows that to happen. So that isn't in the end enviable, because like if you were going to be doing these cool things, you wouldn't be doing it this way. And to a certain extent, some of that quote unquote success is made possible by shitty like personalities and behavior, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. We can so easily forget that being completely unbelieving or unaccountable to the harm that you've done can be a great asset in being successful. And I don't know if that's the case with this person, but you know, kind of being on the side of the person who wrote in, if I'm imagining it from their perspective, it may be helpful to consider that, you know, like what is it in this person's life or circumstances or the way that they relate to the world made it so that they maybe know that they've been shitty and they're like, you know, doesn't matter, I want to do this thing, rather than kind of address what I've done in terms of hurting others. Yeah, I think I'm just trying to be cognizant of like when we talk about harm, there's just like a full spectrum of harm, and I have no idea what harm this person caused. And if this person wrote in and said, this person abused me and I tried to do some sort of, you know, private or mediated accountability process and they refused, like that's a very different conversation than like we had a relationship, like they were shitty, it really hurt, it ended, I didn't feel taken care of. Like, I mean, they're just different conversations.
Right.
So I feel the need to acknowledge that. And I don't even know if it really matters, but
yeah, there's obviously also even more severe harm that could be like imagined in a situation that I don't know
right.
exactly the extent here, but
And
But
not to say that abuse has to coincide with initiating any sort of transformational justice or accountability process. Like, I don't believe that that's warranted all the time. And I don't believe that it's obligated on behalf of the survivor. But that was just kind of an example of this whole spectrum.
no, we've given space also to this like counter feeling of like that, how the demand for accountability process can be used against the victims of harm.
100%. Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I feel like there's no adequate response because there's something that's like out of your control in this situation, which is this person's popularity that compounds a situation of harm that is like, so there's this like kind of general thing that is connected to your own personal experience with this person. And like, it's hard for me to connect it because I can be like, well, on the one hand, you know, to not measure your own success by other people is like something that you can do. But this isn't just a plain old situation of being like, oh, I'm in a band and this band is getting more attention and that sucks, right? Because it's like someone that hurt you and who's being kind of potentially protected by their positionality. And so it's like, yeah, I mean, this is sort of where like the Me Too came from, is for people to try to find a place to like say things, even if it doesn't, like, it's not related to any kind of specific outcome.
Right.
And obviously though, because we live in this world that protects and enables the harm and abuse, a lot of times the people who speak up about this stuff are just treated like they're crazy or vindictive or whatever, trying to get something. And so that also probably hampers this person be able to talk about it, because it's like they don't want to be accused of like trying to take away someone's success or something like that.
Right. Yeah. I'm glad that you brought up that aspect of it too. And I'm just trying so hard to find this great quote about celebrity.
I want to kind of wrap it up, because like, I don't know, I think we've went through a lot of permutations here, and I don't feel like we've given like the, you know, a satisfactory answer to the question. It was just like, how do you manage this?
Yeah.
Which it seems like it's a really difficult task. And I think the best we can sort of say more practically is like having friends who are willing to listen to you, even if it's something that is old or repetitive, as a way also to hold you accountable of not like digging deep into it. Because like, it's just a question of like kind of creating protections for yourself from something that can, out of your control, continue to be like an instigation. But I would also say this person's band probably sucks. And probably whatever you're doing is way cooler and better than this person. And so try to like sit with that. Like, you probably have better friends, better relationships, better connections, and do better work in the world because you aren't a shitty person who hurts people and then, you know, feeds off that energy. So
yeah,
like, as a little affirmation, I wanted to say that.
Yeah, that's right. I love that. I'm pretty sure the person was Joy James.
Oh, I love Joy James.
Yeah. And Joy James said, I don't have celebrities because celebrities are Trojan horses. I heard her say it in a conversation with Deshaun Harrison. I love that quote, right? I don't have celebrities because celebrities are Trojan horses.
Right. Yeah, I think that's really great. And like, I come out of punk, and while punk produces celebrities, the like ethos of punk is like that no one, there should be anti-hierarchical, right? And so when someone vibes off that celebrity and power dynamic, they're kind of doing something that's anathema to like anything that is liberatory. So right that, and as the Trojan horse, it like lets all this bad shit in.
That's right. I think that's a perfect place to wrap up.
Yeah. All right, till next time. Thank you for listening to The Breakup Theory. Until next time, hang in there.